The billionaire who walked into my bookstore and destroyed everything I thought I knew about love. She was 22, broke, and shelving a book about grief when he walked in soaked from the rain. 45 years old, worth 9 figures, and looking at her like she was the only real thing in Manhattan. 3 months later, she was pregnant, alone in a Boston apartment, deleting his name from her phone. 3 months after that, her grandmother would pick up a kitchen knife and point it at his chest and say, "You tell me right now what you did to my girl." Bop it. Gourds. This is the story of Lena Carter and Adrian Wolfe. And if you make it to the end, please drop a like and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. The rain started a little after 6, and by 7 it had turned mean. Lena Carter heard it first through the transom window above the front door of Hawthorne and Sons. That thin, tinny rattle that meant the gutters on 11th Street were overwhelmed again. She was up on the library ladder in the poetry section, one hand gripping the rail, the other wedged between a water-warped copy of Leaves of Grass and the wall. Mrs. Hawthorne had told her twice already this month not to climb the ladder when she was alone in the store. Mrs. Hawthorne had also told her 3 weeks ago that she might not be able to make payroll in February, so Lena figured the rules were negotiable now. "Come on," she muttered, working her fingers behind the book. "Come on, you stubborn little—" The book came free. So did about 4 others behind it. They dropped in a soft avalanche, one clipping her shoulder, another bouncing off the ladder rung and landing spine up on the hardwood with a sound like a slap. Perfect. She climbed down slowly. Her knees hurt. She was 22 years old and her knees hurt, and that felt like a joke the universe was telling her at her own expense. She'd been on her feet since 11 that morning. 7 hours of shelving, 7 hours of pretending the register hadn't rung only 4 times all day, 7 hours of Mrs. Hawthorne sitting in the back office with her reading glasses pushed up into her white hair, going through the books in a different sense of the word, and coming out looking a little grayer each time. Lena knelt on the floor and started gathering the fallen books. A thin one, What the Living Do by Marie Howe, had landed open, its pages bent. She smoothed them flat. She had read that book in a community college English class 2 summers ago, and it had undone her in a way she hadn't been ready for. Her mother had died the year before. The book had arrived at exactly the wrong time, which she would later realize was actually exactly the right time. She set it gently on top of the stack. The bell above the door rang. "We're closed," she called without looking up. "Sorry. 7 on Tuesdays." The sign says 8. She froze with her hand on the books. The voice was male, low, a little tired, not local. Something flatter in the vowels. She turned on her knees. The man standing just inside the door was not the kind of man who came into Hawthorne and Sons. Hawthorne's customers were NYU grad students with canvas tote bags, retired professors from the West Village, the occasional tourist who'd wandered off route looking for the Strand and stumbled in here instead. This man was wearing a charcoal overcoat that was probably worth more than Lena's semester at Hunter. His dark hair was wet and pushed back from his forehead. Water was beating on the shoulders of the coat and dripping, in a small, steady rhythm, onto the welcome mat. He was tall, mid-40s maybe, clean-shaven. There was something carved about his face, not handsome exactly, but settled, like someone had decided a long time ago what that face was going to look like and stuck with it. "I'm sorry," she said, getting up. "The sign's wrong. We close at 7 on Tuesdays. Mrs. Hawthorne keeps meaning to change it. Do you have a first edition of The Master and Margarita?" Lena blinked. "What?" "Bulgakov. The Master and Margarita. First English edition, 1967, Harper and Row. Or the Ginsberg translation, hardcover. I called this morning. A woman told me to come by." "Oh." She rubbed the heel of her hand against her eye. Her mascara was probably doing something unflattering. "That would have been Mrs. Hawthorne. Yeah. She's gone for the night. I can look, but we usually don't carry— It's fine. I can come back." He didn't move. She didn't either. Outside, a car went past on the wet street and its headlights swept across the store windows. And for about a second and a half, the whole shop lit up amber and the shelves threw long shadows across the floor. And then it was dim again, just the 2 yellow pendant lamps by the register and the green banker's light on the front table. "Actually," he said, Can I look anyway? Just, if you don't mind, I'll be quick. She should have said no. The rule was no customers after close because the register was already down and the cash was counted. But he looked. She couldn't figure out what he looked like. Not dangerous, not lost either. Just stopped, like a man who had been walking very fast for a long time and then suddenly wasn't. Fiction's in the back, she said. Left of the staircase. I'll show you. Thank you. She led him through the shop. He followed at a careful distance, the kind of distance people kept when they didn't want to seem like they were following a young woman through an empty store at night. She appreciated that, without knowing quite why. His shoes didn't squeak. He smelled faintly of cold rain and something else. Some cologne, probably, but not the kind that announced itself. Expensive by subtraction. Bulgakov fan? She said over her shoulder. My father was. Ah. They passed biography, past history. The pendant lamp in the fiction section had been flickering for 2 weeks, and she made a mental note, again, to tell Mrs. Hawthorne, and then remembered, again, that Mrs. Hawthorne had bigger problems than a flickering lamp. Russians are over here, she said. She crouched and ran her finger along the spines. Bobble, Bulgakov, Bulgakov, Bulgakov. We have 3. Paperback penguin, paperback picador, and... She tilted her head, reading the spine. This one, Grove Press, 67, hardcover. Doesn't say first edition on the jacket, could be a later printing. She pulled it out and handed it up to him without looking. He took it, and their fingers brushed, and neither of them did anything about it, which she noted and then immediately tried to unnote. He opened the cover, held the book up near the pendant light, turned to the copyright page. It's a first, he said quietly. Seriously? How much? The sticker says $40. That's underpriced by about $200. She sat back on her heels and looked up at him. Are you trying to warn me you're about to rob us? His mouth did something. Not a smile exactly. A considering look, like she had said something unexpected and he was taking a second to catalog it. No, he said. I'll pay the $240. We can't charge you $240. The sticker says $40. Then I'll pay $40 and leave the difference as a tip. We don't, she almost laughed. We don't have a tip jar. It's a bookstore. Leave it in the register. Call it a donation. He was saying this in a perfectly even tone, standing in a water-damaged shop on a dying block, holding a book he planned to overpay for by a factor of 6. Lena stood up slowly. She wiped her palms on her jeans. She was suddenly very aware of the fact that her hair was in a messy bun, and there was a coffee stain on her sweater from that morning, and she was barefoot. She'd kicked her boots off behind the register 2 hours ago. Okay, she said. Come on up to the counter. I'll ring you out. He followed her back. She got behind the register, and he set the book down on the glass, and for the first time they were looking at each other in proper light. His eyes were dark. Not quite black, but close. There was a small white scar under his left eyebrow, the kind a kid gets and then forgets about. He was watching her the way people watch something they are trying very hard not to misunderstand. You're bleeding, he said. What? Your finger. She looked down. There was a thin red line across the knuckle of her index finger. A paper cut. She hadn't noticed. Probably from the avalanche in poetry. Oh. She pressed her thumb against it. Hazard of the trade. Do you have a... Yeah, somewhere. She crouched behind the counter, rummaged in the shoebox Mrs. Hawthorne called the first aid kit, came up with a Band-Aid that had been in there since roughly the Obama administration. The adhesive was dead. She wrestled with it for a second, then gave up and just pressed the pad against her finger. When she stood back up, he was holding out a handkerchief. A real one. Cloth. White. Folded into a neat square. You don't have to... Take it. It's clean. She took it. She pressed it against her knuckle. It was soft in a way that cheap fabric was never soft. Thank you. Sure. I'll wash it. I can get it back to you. Keep it? She rang up the book. $40. He gave her 300s from a money clip, not a wallet, a money clip, which she had previously only seen in movies set in the 1960s, and waved off the change. Register's already closed for the night, she said. I can't. Then keep it. Buy yourself dinner. I'm not going to take $260 from you. Why not? She opened her mouth. She closed it. She considered the question seriously, which surprised her, and then she said, "Oh, because I don't know you, and my grandmother raised me better than that." Something actually did change in his face that time, a softening at the corner of his mouth. It made him look less tired and more like an actual person. "Fair," he said. "Will you take 60 for staying open late?" "I'd take 20. 60's my floor." She laughed, a short, surprised one. "Are we negotiating?" "A little." "Fine. 40. Done." He put two 20s on the counter, pocketed the rest. She made change for the 40, and he took the 4 singles and the coins and slid them into his coat pocket like the most natural thing in the world, like he was a normal man who cared about coins. He picked up the book. He didn't leave. Outside, the rain had gotten louder. A bus went by and threw a sheet of water across the sidewalk. "Is there a back way out?" he said. "What?" "I parked." He gestured vaguely. "Never mind. It's fine." "No, what?" He hesitated. "There are people waiting for me on the corner. 2 of them. I don't feel like dealing with them right now." She frowned. "Like fans?" "Reporters." Her frown deepened. "For what?" He looked at her for a long moment. She got the strong, strange sense that he was deciding something. "My company had a bad quarter," he said finally. "Bad enough to make the journal. They've been following me for about 3 days. I made the mistake of telling my driver to drop me at the corner because I wanted to walk. I thought the rain would discourage them. It didn't." "Oh. So yes, a back way if there is one." "There is, through the stockroom. It comes out on 12th. Would that be all right?" Yeah, come on." She came out from behind the counter and led him through the narrow aisle between the remainder tables, past the children's section with its sad little beanbag, to the door at the back marked "Staff Only" in peeling vinyl letters. She pushed through. He followed. The stockroom was a mess of cardboard and dust. A bare bulb hung from the ceiling. She knocked it with her head, as always, and as always it swung and made the shadows lurch. The back door had 3 locks. She worked them, top, middle, deadbolt. "Sorry," she said. "Neighborhood used to be rougher." "Used to be?" "Still is a little, but Mrs. Hawthorne doesn't like me to say that." The door opened onto the alley. The rain hit immediately, cold and loud, the sound bouncing off the brick walls on either side. There was a steel fire escape directly overhead, and water was pouring off it in a solid ribbon about 4 feet to their right. He stopped in the doorway. "Thank you," he said. "For this? For the book? For—" He gestured back toward the store. "All of it. It's a bookstore, not a favor. It's a favor when I'm the one doing the asking." She looked up at him. He was standing very close because the doorway was narrow. She could see the water still beaded in his hair. She could see the small white scar. She could see that his eyes, this close, weren't black at all, but a very dark brown, the color of wet bark. "What's your name?" he said. She almost didn't tell him. She didn't know why. Something in her was reading the situation as important in a way she couldn't justify. A man she'd known for 20 minutes, standing in a back doorway, about to disappear into a storm. "Lena?" she said. "Lena Carter." "Adrian?" "Adrian?" He smiled, a real one finally, small and a little wry. "If I tell you, you'll Google me." "I'll Google you anyway. I have your first name, and I know you were in the journal this week." "Fair." "So, Wolf." She made her face stay still, because she was 22, not 12, and she knew better than to react. But the name registered. She'd heard it. Not from the journal, from the Times, maybe, or one of those magazines Mrs. Hawthorne left in the bathroom. Wolf Capital, or Wolf Industries. Something Wolf, a man who owned things. "Have a good night, Lena Carter," he said. "Have a good night, Adrian Wolf." He stepped out into the alley and pulled the lapels of his coat up against the rain, and then he was around the corner and gone. She stood in the doorway a moment longer. The rain was coming sideways now. A cab honked 2 streets over. Somewhere a woman was laughing, the sound bouncing weird off wet brick. She closed the door. She locked all 3 locks. She walked back through the stockroom, through the shop, and she stood behind the counter with the handkerchief pressed to her finger, and she realized, with a small, slow drop in her stomach, that she had stopped bleeding probably 10 minutes ago. She didn't Google him that night. She told herself it was because she was tired. She locked up at 8:05, walked the 6 blocks to the F train in rain that had finally slowed to a mist, rode the train to Brooklyn with her headphones in and her eyes closed, and came up out of the station 2 blocks from the apartment she shared with her grandmother. The apartment was on the 2nd floor of a walk-up off Church Avenue. Her grandmother, Ruth Carter, had lived there for 38 years since before Lena's mother was born, and she had survived 3 landlords, 2 rent hikes, 1 fire on the 4th floor, and a husband who had left in 1994 and never come back. She was 76. She was 4'11". She could cut a grown man with a look. She was in the kitchen when Lena came in, standing at the stove in her blue housecoat, stirring something in a pot. "You're late. Rain." Lena kissed her grandmother on the top of the head. Ruth's hair was thin and silver and smelled, as it always did, of the drugstore shampoo she had been buying since Lena was a child. "What's for dinner?" "Rice and beans, and I fried the last of the chicken." "I love you." Lena peeled out of her wet coat and hung it over the radiator. She kicked her boots off. She washed her hands. She sat down at the small kitchen table, and Ruth put a plate down in front of her and sat down across from her with a smaller plate of her own. They ate for a while without talking. That was normal. Ruth didn't believe in talking over food. When they were mostly done, Ruth said, "You get more hours this week?" "No." "You ask?" "There aren't any to ask for, Graham. Mrs. Hawthorne's barely keeping the lights on." Ruth made a small sound in the back of her throat. It wasn't a word. It meant, roughly, "I have opinions about this, but I am not going to share them because you already know them." Lena hesitated. "I got a weird tip today." "How weird?" $40. Ruth's eyebrows went up. "On what? A book?" "Yeah." "He hit on you?" "No." "Sure?" "No." "Graham." "Girl?" "Men don't tip $40 on a book unless they're hitting on you or they're confused. Which was he?" Lena poked her rice with her fork. "Neither, I think." She thought about telling Ruth the rest, the coat, the money clip, the handkerchief, the reporters, and decided against it. Not because she wanted to hide it, because she didn't know what it was yet, and she didn't want to hand it to her grandmother half-formed and have her grandmother do what her grandmother always did, which was name it for her. After dinner, she washed the dishes. Ruth sat on the couch in the living room with the TV on low, watching a rerun of Murder, She Wrote. Lena could hear the dialogue from the kitchen, familiar as weather. She went to her room. It was a small room. The bed was a twin. The desk was from IKEA and had been old when she got it secondhand at 16. On the wall above the desk was a corkboard covered in things. A postcard from Barcelona a friend had sent her 3 years ago. A photograph of her mother at 24 holding baby Lena in a hospital gown. A letter from Boston University Graduate School of Arts and Sciences dated 3 weeks ago, acknowledging receipt of her application for the MFA in fiction. She took the handkerchief out of her pocket. She unfolded it. In the corner, in very small embroidery, there were 2 letters, A.W. She stared at them for a long time. Then she folded the handkerchief back up, laid it on the desk, and opened her laptop. "Adrian Wolfe," she typed. She hit enter. Ubit. What came up was more than she expected, and also exactly what she should have expected. The first hit was a Wikipedia page. The second was a Forbes profile. The third was a Bloomberg article from that morning, headlined, "Wolf Holdings shares down 14% on Q4 miss. Sasai Walk Tree Question Strategy." The fourth was a paparazzi site that had photographs of him exiting a restaurant in Midtown with a blonde woman in a green dress. The photo was dated 4 months ago. The woman was identified in the caption as his ex-wife. She sat back. She looked at the photograph for a long time. The woman was beautiful in the way that a certain kind of Manhattan woman is beautiful. The way that costs money. Not because anyone has done anything to her face, but because her hair and her skin and her dress and her shoes and the handbag she is holding all cost money. And the cumulative effect of all those dollars is a person who seems to move through a slightly better world than the rest of us. Adrian in the photograph looked the way he had looked in the store, a little tired, a little carved. He was not touching the woman. They were walking about 3 feet apart. His hand was in his coat pocket. Lena closed the laptop. She lay on her back on her bed and looked at the ceiling. She thought, he is 45 years old. She thought, he is divorced. She thought, he is worth, according to that magazine, somewhere in the neighborhood of $900 million. And I sold him a book for 40, and he tipped me 40, and he gave me his handkerchief, and She didn't know how to end that sentence. She got up. She put on her pajamas. She brushed her teeth. She went to bed. She lay awake for a long time, listening to Ruth finish murder. She wrote and shuffled down the hall to her own bedroom, listening to a siren that passed somewhere on church, listening to the radiator tick. She told herself she was not going to think about him again. She thought about him again. He came back on Thursday. It was a slow afternoon. Lena was alphabetizing the biography shelf, which Mrs. Hawthorne had asked her to do roughly 11 times since September, and it was raining again. Lighter this time, almost a drizzle, the kind of rain that made the city smell briefly like the country, like wet leaves. The bell rang. "Be right with you," she called, and she was sliding a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt into its place between Rosenberg and Rubin when she heard his voice behind her say, "Take your time." She turned. He was in the same overcoat. The coat was dry this time. There was a paper coffee cup in each of his hands. He was holding them the way a man holds 2 coffees he has no intention of drinking both of. "Hi," he said. "Hi, I brought you coffee. I didn't know how you took it, so I got 1 black and 1 with everything." "Are those both from Gregory's?" "Yes." "Those are $8 each." "Yes." "I take it black. Then I drink the other one and feel ridiculous." She came down off the step stool. She took the black coffee. Their fingers brushed again, and this time she was ready for it, and it didn't make her do anything stupid. "Thank you." "You're welcome." "Why are you here, Mr. Wolf?" He looked at her over the lid of his coffee. There was a beat where she thought he was going to lie. She watched him decide not to. "I don't know," he said. "Honestly." "Okay. Is that all right?" "It's your $8. 32. 32? The coffees were 8, but I had to take a car here, and parking in this neighborhood is—" "Mr. Wolf." "Yes. Are you nervous?" "A little." "Oh." She didn't know what to do with that. She had expected him, if he came back at all, to come back the way he had come in the first time, carved, settled, quiet. Not nervous. Nervous reshuffled the deck. Nervous made him a person instead of a headline. "I like talking to you," he said. "That's the real answer. I like talking to you, and it doesn't happen to me very often anymore, and I wanted to see if it was a fluke." "A fluke? A one-time thing? And you're going to determine that over a single $8 coffee?" "Probably several, if you'll let me." She looked at him. She thought about the photograph of him and the ex-wife in their slightly better world. She thought about Ruth's face at the kitchen table last night. She thought about the Forbes number, some $900 million, that had sat in her chest all week like something she'd swallowed wrong. She thought about her mother, who had died at 47 of a heart that had simply quit, and who had once told her when Lena was 15 and crying over a boy, "Baby, the only thing worse than a mistake is a maybe you never made." "There's a diner on 13th, Lena said. "The Parkside. Mrs. Hawthorne lets me take lunch at 2. "It's 1:45. "I know." "All right." "And Mr. Wolf, Adrian." "Adrian." "Yes." "You buy your own coffee. I buy mine. This isn't a thing. It's a coffee." "It's a coffee. Say it like you mean it." "It's a coffee, Lena." "Better." He almost smiled again. She almost smiled back. Neither of them quite did. Outside, the drizzle was thickening toward real rain, and inside, the pendant lamp in the fiction section was still flickering, and on the biography shelf, Eleanor Roosevelt was in her place between Rosenberg and Rubin, and Lena Carter, 22 years old, broke, and very nearly engaged to a graduate program 300 miles away that she hadn't told a soul about yet, was about to walk out into the rain with a man whose name she had already known, whose coat cost more than her rent, whose life had nothing in common with hers at any point that she could see. And something in her, some stubborn young animal she did not yet know the name of, was telling her very quietly, very clearly, go. She went. The Parkside Diner hadn't been renovated since the Clinton administration, and Lena loved it for that. The vinyl booths were patched with duct tape the color of the vinyl. The menu was laminated and sticky at the corners, and the coffee came in thick white mugs that had a small chip on the rim, every single one, as if chipping was part of the manufacturing process. She took him to the booth in the back, the one by the window that looked out onto the brick wall of the deli next door, because it was the booth she always took when she wanted to be by herself, and she had decided in the 30 seconds it took them to walk from the bookstore to the diner that this was going to be a sit-down that she was in charge of. "This okay?" she said. "It's great. You don't have to say that." "I'm not." She slid into the booth. He slid into the other side. He was too tall for it. His knees bumped hers under the table, and he said sorry and scooted sideways and bumped them again, and they both laughed a little, which surprised her because she hadn't planned on laughing yet. The waitress came. Her name was Denise. She had been working at the Parkside for as long as Lena had been coming to the Parkside, which was about 2 years, and she had one of those voices that had been smoked down to a rasp sometime in the Reagan era and never recovered. "Lena, baby, who's your friend?" "This is Adrian." "Hello, Adrian." "Hi." Denise looked at him. She looked at his coat. She looked back at Lena. She did a very small, very eloquent thing with one eyebrow that Lena had previously only seen her do to men who came in and tried to order an egg white omelet. "What are we having?" Denise said. "Grilled cheese," Lena said. "Fries, coffee." "Adrian?" "The same, please." "The same. Please." Denise left without writing anything down. "She hates me," Adrian said. "She doesn't hate you. She's deciding." "Deciding what?" "Whether you're worth the trouble." He considered this seriously. She liked that about him, she was realizing. He considered things seriously. Most men she'd met didn't know how to take a joke and a question at the same time. He took both. He took them carefully, like a man handling something he didn't want to break. "What's the verdict?" he said. "Jury's out." "Fair." The coffees came. They put their hands around the mugs. Outside the window, a man in a delivery uniform was hauling a hand truck stacked with cases of Snapple past the brick wall of the deli, and the wheels were making that particular wet pavement sound that New York makes in the rain, which was not a metaphor for anything, Lena reminded herself. It was just a sound. "So," she said. "So, tell me something." "What do you want to know?" "Something real. Something you wouldn't tell a reporter." He looked at her over the rim of the mug. "That's a big opener." "I have 45 minutes. I can't do small talk the whole time. My grandmother raised me to get to the point." "Your grandmother raised you?" "Since I was 14. "What happened at 14? "That's not the game. I asked first." He set the mug down. He thought about it. She watched him think, watched him scroll through things presumably and discard the ones that were safe and arrive eventually at something that was not safe. "I don't sleep," he said. "Like insomnia? Like 4 hours a night for about 2 years now. 3 sometimes. My doctor keeps writing me prescriptions and I keep not filling them. My ex-wife used to say I was afraid of my own dreams. I didn't think she was right at the time. I'm starting to think she might have been." Lena wrapped both hands tighter around the mug. "That's real," she said. "You asked." "Yeah. Your turn." She thought about lying. She thought about saying something mild. "I'm scared of the subway at night. I hate my middle name." And letting this stay a coffee. But he had just told her he hadn't slept in 2 years, and he had said it while looking her in the eye, and it felt like she'd be a coward if she handed him back less than what he'd given her. "My mother died when I was 14, she said. "Heart attack in our kitchen. I came home from school and she was on the floor next to the fridge. Her phone was in her hand. She'd called 911, but she hadn't. She couldn't get the address out, I guess, because they didn't come in time. And for about a year after, I used to check the pulse on my grandmother's wrist while she was sleeping. Just every night. I'd sneak into her room and I'd put my fingers on her wrist, very lightly, and I'd count to 60. And if it was too slow, I'd wake her up. I woke her up so many times that summer." She stopped. She realized her eyes were wet and she was smiling somehow, in a weird lopsided way like her face hadn't caught up to her chest yet. I haven't told anyone that, she said. Ever. I don't know why I just told you. I'm sorry about your mother. It was a long time ago. It wasn't. She looked up at him. It wasn't a long time ago, he said. You're 20, but 22. You're 22. That was 8 years ago. That's not long. She didn't answer. She couldn't quite. Denise came back with the grilled cheeses and set them down and said, without looking at either of them, "Eat your food before it gets cold," in a tone that managed to be both scolding and slightly approving, and then she was gone again. They ate. For a while they didn't talk. Lena dipped her fries in ketchup and he dipped his in nothing, and she said, "You don't use ketchup?" And he said, "I don't love it." And she said, "That's psychotic." And he laughed, really laughed, a short surprise sound. And she felt something shift in her chest that she did not have the language for yet. They talked about other things. His father had been a high school chemistry teacher in Pittsburgh and had died of a stroke when Adrian was 31, 4 months before Adrian took his company public. Her father had left when she was 2, and she didn't remember his face, only the smell of his coat, which she thought might be a made-up memory. His ex-wife's name was Celeste. They'd been married 9 years. No children. It had ended, he said, not badly, which in his experience was worse than ending badly, because ending badly meant you could at least be angry. "You still talk to her?" Lena said. "Sometimes. We have lawyers for most of it." "Oh. She's not a bad person. I think we just stopped being real with each other, and by the time we noticed, there wasn't enough left to fix." "That's sad." "It's common." "Doesn't make it less sad." He looked at her for a long second. "No," he said. "It doesn't." The check came. He reached for it. She reached for it faster. "Lena, I said I was buying my own. It's $22. Then I'll leave 12 and you'll leave 10 and we're square." "That's not how a check works." "It is if I say it is." He held up his hands in mock surrender and put his wallet away, and she paid her half with a 20 from her apron, and he paid his half with a 20 from the money clip, and Denise took both bills without commenting. But on her way back, she slid a small cardboard box of mints across the table to Lena and gave her a look that said, "All right, maybe." They stood outside the diner on 13th. The rain had thinned to nothing. The sky was that dark silver color the sky got in New York in November, when it couldn't commit to being day or night. "I have to go back," Lena said. "I know." So. He hesitated. Then he said, "Can I come by tomorrow?" "To the store?" "To the store." She didn't answer right away. She looked past him, down 13th Street, toward the corner where the first cabs were starting to turn their lights on for the evening shift. Something in her was saying no, not because she didn't want him to come, but because she wanted him to come, and she wasn't sure that was a reason she could defend. "Yes," she said, "but Adrian." "Yes. If you come back, you have to come back for real. Don't come back for 3 weeks and then disappear. I can't do that. I've done that and I don't want to do it again." "Okay?" "Say it." "I won't disappear." "Okay." She walked back to the bookstore. She didn't look back. She could feel him still standing on the corner watching her go. When she got to the door of Hawthorne and Sons and pushed it open and the bell rang, she finally let herself glance over her shoulder, and he was gone. She put her apron back on. She went to the biography shelf. She slid Theodore Roosevelt in between Roosevelt, Eleanor, and Rosenberg. Her hands were steady. Her stomach was not. He came back the next day. And the day after that. And the day after that. By the end of the second week, there was a pattern. He would come in around 4 when the store was quietest, and he would not make her stop working. He would browse. He would ask her questions about books she had read. He would pull down some novel she had never heard of and tell her she had to read it. And when she said she couldn't afford to read anything she hadn't already bought used, he would buy it for her and say it was for the store, not her, and leave it on the counter. And she would take it home and read it in bed. He bought a lot of books. He bought so many books that after 2 weeks, Mrs. Hawthorne came out of the back office one afternoon, watched him leave with a paper bag full of hardcovers, waited until the bell had stopped ringing, and said, "Lena." "Yes?" "Who is that man?" "A customer." "Mrs. Hawthorne." "Lena." "He's a customer. He's spent $1,300 in this store this month." "Really?" "Don't play dumb with me, girl. I've known you since you were 17. Lena sighed. She set down the rag she'd been using to wipe the counter. His name is Adrian. He's a friend. It's nothing. Lena, look at me. Lena looked at her. Mrs. Hawthorne was 68 years old. She had been a librarian in Queens for 41 years before she'd opened this shop, and before that she had been a divorce paralegal, and before that she had been, according to her own telling, a fairly successful dancer on a cruise line, although nobody in Lena's experience had ever seen photographic evidence of this. She was not a soft woman. She had been kind to Lena, consistently, for 2.5 years, but it was a flinty kindness, the kind that came with conditions. Men like that, Mrs. Hawthorne said, don't come into bookstores like this for books. He came in for a first edition of Bulgakov. He came in for something. Mrs. Hawthorne, I'm not telling you what to do. It sounds like you are. I'm telling you to pay attention. That's all. A man his age, with his money, he's not confused about what he's doing. He knows. You should know, too. She went back into her office and shut the door. Lena stood at the counter for a long time. Then she picked up the rag and started wiping again. She wiped the same 3 inches of counter for about 4 minutes before she realized what she was doing and made herself stop. That night, when Adrian called, he called now, every night, around 11, after she was home and in bed and the apartment was quiet. She said, Adrian? Hi. What are we doing? There was a pause on his end. She could hear in the background the faint hush of traffic. He was in his car, probably. He was always in his car at 11. I don't know, he said. That's not good enough anymore. I know. I'm 22, Adrian. You're 45. Yeah, I know. And I'm broke, and you're whatever you are. And I don't know if this is a thing you're doing because it's fun, or because you're going through something, or because I don't know, Adrian. I don't know. And I'm not going to let myself get any further into it until I do. There was a long silence on the line. Then he said, I don't want to do it because it's fun. Okay. And I'm not going through a thing. I mean, I am. The company is a thing. My life is a thing. But this isn't me grabbing at something to feel better. I want you to know that. How do I know that? You don't. Not yet. That's the problem with it. Adrian. Yes. What do you want? Another pause. She could hear him breathe out, slowly. She had the sudden, stupidly vivid image of him sitting in the back of a town car somewhere on Park Avenue, coat unbuttoned, head back against the leather, phone held loosely to his ear. I want to take you to dinner, he said. A real dinner, not a diner. A date. A date. Adrian, I don't own anything I can wear to the kind of dinner you mean. Then I'll take you to the kind of dinner you can wear what you already own to. That's not a kind of dinner. It is if I say it is. She laughed before she could stop herself. You're using my line. I'm using your line. Fine. Fine. Yes. Fine. A date. But Adrian. Yes. If this is stupid, tell me now. I don't know if it's stupid. That's fair. I know it's real. That's all I know. She hung up a few minutes later and lay on her back and looked at the ceiling, which was flaking in one corner in the shape, vaguely, of Florida. She didn't sleep for a long time. When she finally did, she dreamed she was in the bookstore and all the shelves were empty, and Adrian was at the door, and she couldn't tell whether he was coming in or going out. The date was at a small Italian place in the West Village run by a family Adrian knew, which Lena found out later was the entire reason they went there. He had asked the owner, in advance, not to give either of them a menu with prices on it, because he didn't want her to know what anything cost. She wore a black sweater and jeans. He wore a dark gray sweater and jeans. They looked, for once, like two people who could plausibly be on a date with each other. She told him, over the second glass of wine, about Boston, about the application, about the acceptance letter that had come the week before he walked into the store, which she had not told anyone about yet, not Ruth, not Mrs. Hawthorne, not the 2 friends from Hunter she still half kept in touch with. The MFA. 2 years. A modest stipend. A small, clean, almost unbelievable miracle. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he said, You should go. I haven't decided. Lena, You should go. It's 2 years in Boston. I know. We would, I know. Adrian, I'm not going to be the reason you don't go. I'm not going to be that. I won't let you do that, and I don't want you to look at me in 5 years and think I was. She looked down at her plate. She had not eaten in 20 minutes. Her pasta was cold. I don't want to leave, she said. I know. I know. Don't say I know again. Okay. She laughed, wetly, and wiped her eye with the back of her hand. We'll figure it out, he said. It's a train ride. It's 4 hours. People have done harder. Have they? Sure. Who? I don't know. Somebody. She laughed again, and then she was crying a little, just at the corners, and he reached across the table and took her hand, and he held it the way he had held the coffee cup that first afternoon at the diner, carefully, like a man handling something he didn't want to break. They walked back to her subway stop together. It was cold, the kind of cold that made your lungs hurt. He walked her all the way down into the station, which no one ever did, and he waited on the platform with her until the train came, and when the doors opened he kissed her, finally, for the first time. A short kiss, on the mouth, with his hand on the side of her face, and then he stepped back, and the doors closed and the train pulled away. And through the window she watched him stand on the platform in his dark coat with his hands in his pockets until the tunnel took him. She got off at Church Avenue. She walked home. Ruth was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a crossword puzzle. You're late again, Ruth said. I know. Lena. I know, Graham. Sit down. She sat. Tell me who he is. She told her. She told her all of it. The bookstore, the rain, the handkerchief, the diner, the phone calls at 11, the Italian place in the village. She told her about Boston. She told her about the application and the acceptance and the fact that she hadn't known how to say it out loud until tonight. Ruth listened without interrupting. When Lena was done, Ruth took a sip of her tea and she set the cup down and she said, Baby, that man is 45 years old. I know. And he has money. I know. And you have a plan. You made a plan. For yourself. Before he came along. Do you remember your plan? Yes. Is he in it? Lena didn't answer. Is he in it, Lena? No. Then you be careful. You hear me? You be careful. A man like that, he's not going to mean to take up room, but he's going to take up room. Because men like that, they don't know how to stand in a house without filling it. And a girl your age, a girl with your head, you need room. You need your own room. Graham, don't Graham me. I'm not telling you to leave him. I'm telling you to keep your feet. Okay. Go to Boston. Okay? And if he's real, he'll still be there when you come home. Okay? Ruth reached across the table and put her hand over Lena's. Her hand was small and dry and very warm. I love you, baby. I love you, Graham. Go to bed. She went to bed. She did not sleep. She told Adrian about the scholarship acceptance, formally, on a Tuesday. She told Mrs. Hawthorne on Thursday. Mrs. Hawthorne cried, which Lena had not been prepared for. She had thought Mrs. Hawthorne was not the kind of woman who cried, but it turned out she was. She just did it quietly and without theater, dabbing at her eyes with the heel of her hand and saying, Oh, good for you, Lena. Good for you, honey. Good for you. Over and over, until Lena was crying too. When do you start? Mrs. Hawthorne said. January? That's 6 weeks. Yeah. Okay, we'll figure it out. I can work through Christmas, full hours. I'll be here every day until I leave. Okay? She went home that night and told Ruth she had told Mrs. Hawthorne. Ruth nodded. Ruth made dinner. They ate. 2 days later, Lena came into the bookstore and found a man she didn't recognize standing at the counter with a clipboard. He was wearing a suit. He had an NYU backpack on one shoulder, which didn't go with the suit, and he looked up when she came in and said, You must be Lena. I must be. I'm Daniel Park. I'm an associate at Morgenstern Hale. I represent Mr. Wolfe. Mr. Wolfe. Yes. Something very small and cold landed in the center of Lena's chest. Is he okay? He's fine. I'm sorry. I should have led with that. He's fine. He just asked me to come by and... Daniel Park glanced down at his clipboard. He's asked me to introduce you to the new owner. The new what? The new owner of the bookstore. Lena stared at him. I'm sorry? Mr. Wolf closed on the property yesterday, along with the business. He wanted me to come by and let you know personally and to tell you that as far as he's concerned, nothing changes. Mrs. Hawthorne keeps her salary through retirement. The staff is me. The staff keeps their job. You. The staff is you, sorry. He wanted you to know that the position is yours for as long as you want it. And if you don't want it because of Boston, that's fine too. And he'd like to talk to you about potentially expanding the store's programming for the community. Lena did not hear the rest of the sentence. She was looking past Daniel Park at the back of the store, at the door to Mrs. Hawthorne's office. And she was realizing that Mrs. Hawthorne had not cried on Thursday because she was proud of Lena. Or not only because of that, Mrs. Hawthorne had cried because she had already known. Does Mrs. Hawthorne know? Lena said. Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. Yes, she and Mr. Wolf have been in discussion for about 3 weeks. She approached him actually through an intermediary. The financials were, she was going to have to close it in February. So when Mr. Wolf, get out. I'm sorry? Get out, please, right now. Daniel Park looked at her for a second. Then he nodded, quickly, and picked up his backpack and put a business card on the counter and left. The bell rang on his way out. Lena stood at the counter. She did not move for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and she called Adrian, and when he answered, she said very quietly, "You bought the store." A pause. "Lena, you bought the store." Lena, it wasn't like that. What was it like? Mrs. Hawthorne came to me. She approached me. She was going to lose it. When? 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. Yes. And you didn't tell me. You didn't tell me for 3 weeks. I was going to. When? After you left for Boston. Oh, that's great. That's great, Adrian. So I'd be gone and couldn't do anything about it. Lena. Don't Lena me. It wasn't. What was it? He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had gone flat in a way she had not heard it go before, and she understood, a little late, that he was holding something down. I didn't want to lose you, he said. That's what it was. I didn't want you going to Boston thinking the only thing in this city you were leaving behind was me. I wanted you to have something to come back to, something besides me. And I could afford to make sure you did, so I did. Adrian, yes, that's not a gift. That's a cage. It's not a cage, Lena. Tell me how it isn't. Tell me how my boss, who I love, who I thought I knew, has been lying to me for 3 weeks because my boyfriend bought her silence. Tell me how the job I'm keeping is a job you gave me. Tell me how I'm supposed to walk into this building tomorrow and not know every single time I touch the door that you own the building, you own the business, I don't own you, Lena. No, you don't. But you sure did your best to make sure I'd come back. He didn't answer. She hung up. She put the phone face down on the counter. She sat on the stool. Her hands were shaking. She put them flat on the glass to make them stop. The bell rang. She jerked her head up. A customer. An old man in a brown coat she half recognized, one of the regulars, had come in, was nodding at her, was shuffling toward the poetry section. She nodded back automatically and arranged her face into the face she wore for customers. She thought about her grandmother at the kitchen table. A girl your age, a girl with your head, you need room. She thought about Adrian in the alley in the rain. I won't disappear. She thought about the handkerchief folded in her sock drawer, the 2 small embroidered letters in the corner, A.W. The old man brought a battered copy of Wendell Berry to the counter and asked her how much, and she heard her own voice tell him $8, and she heard her own hands take his 10 and give him 2 singles back, and she heard her own voice say, "Thank you, come again," and she watched him go. The bell rang. The door closed. She sat alone in a bookstore that, it turned out, was not Mrs. Hawthorne's anymore. Not hers. Not anyone she had trusted before 9 o'clock this morning. Outside on 11th Street, the sky was the color of old nickel, and a wind had come up and was pushing trash along the gutters, and somewhere 3 blocks east a horn was stuck, and the sound of it, flat, endless, furious, filled the whole afternoon. She put her forehead down on the cool glass of the counter. She closed her eyes. She did not cry. She wanted to. She would not let herself. She lay there with her face against the glass and her hands flat, and she thought, with a clarity that was almost cruel, that she had been warned. Every person in her life who loved her had warned her. Her grandmother had warned her. Mrs. Hawthorne had warned her, in her own terrible way. Her mother, who was not alive to warn her, had warned her 8 years ago in a kitchen in Brooklyn, without knowing it, by dying on a Tuesday at 47 and leaving her daughter with the permanent conviction that the floor could go out from under you at any time, in any room, no matter how safe the room had seemed the hour before. She lifted her head. She picked up her phone. She looked at the screen. 3 missed calls from Adrian. 2 texts. She didn't read them. She pressed the side button until the screen went dark. She put the phone in her apron pocket. She stood up. She walked to the back of the store. She went into Mrs. Hawthorne's office without knocking, and Mrs. Hawthorne looked up from her desk with her reading glasses pushed up into her white hair. And when she saw Lena's face, her own face went through about 4 expressions very fast and landed, finally, on something that was not apology, but was close to it. "Lena," she said. Lena didn't say anything. She just stood in the doorway of the office and looked at the woman who had taught her how to price a first edition, who had loaned her $50 one February when her MetroCard ran out, who had, as recently as Thursday, cried at the news that Lena was going to Boston. "Honey," Mrs. Hawthorne said, "don't." "Lena, I'm going home." "Lena, I'll be in tomorrow. I'll finish the week. I'll finish the month. I said I would, and I will. But I'm going home now." She took off her apron. She folded it. She put it on the chair by Mrs. Hawthorne's desk. She walked back through the store. She got her coat. She walked to the F train. She sat in a car that was mostly empty, except for a woman reading a romance novel with a pink cover, and a man asleep at the far end with his head against the window. And she did not cry on the train, and she did not cry on the walk home, and she did not cry when she came in the door of the apartment. And Ruth looked up from the couch and said, "Baby, what?" And she did not cry when she walked past Ruth without speaking and went into her room and shut the door. She cried sitting on the floor with her back against the door, with her knees drawn up and her arms around her knees, and her forehead down on her arms for a long time, quietly, the way she had learned to cry at 14, so that the person on the other side of the door would not hear. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, which was still in her coat, which was still on her. She didn't take it out. It buzzed again. She didn't take it out. Outside on Church Avenue, a bus sighed to a stop and started up again. The radiator in her room ticked. The thin line of afternoon light under her door narrowed and went gray and finally went out. And still she sat on the floor, and still she didn't move. And somewhere in Manhattan, in the back of a car he couldn't remember getting into, Adrian Wolfe was watching his phone go to voicemail for the 4th time in an hour. And he was realizing, slowly, the way a man realizes he has done serious damage, that the thing he had been most afraid of had already started happening, and he had been the one to start it. He didn't come to the store for 3 days, which was, Lena realized by the second afternoon, almost worse than if he had. If he had shown up, she could have been angry at him in person, and the anger would have had somewhere to go. Instead, she had to carry it around inside her like something wet and heavy, sloshing against her ribs while she rang up paperbacks and dusted shelves and pretended, for Mrs. Hawthorne's sake, that the temperature in the shop hadn't dropped 10 degrees in the 90 hours since Daniel Park of Morgenstern Hale had walked in with his NYU backpack and his clipboard. Mrs. Hawthorne had tried twice to talk to her about it. The first time Lena had let her get as far as, "Lena, I need you to understand," before she had walked calmly to the poetry section and pretended to reshelve a book she had shelved 2 hours earlier. The second time, Mrs. Hawthorne had come up behind her at the register and said, "Honey, I was going to lose everything. The building, the inventory, all of it. I was going to be 70 years old and renting a room in my niece's house in White Plains. I was looking at—" "I know," Lena said. "Do you?" "I know, Mrs. Hawthorne. I'm not angry at you." "Yes, you are." "Fine, I am a little, but I understand." "Lena." "I said I understand, Mrs. Hawthorne." She had not turned around during the conversation. Mrs. Hawthorne had stood behind her for a long moment and then had gone back into her office and had not come out again until closing. Adrian called every night at 11. Lena let it ring. The first night he left a voicemail, 32 seconds of silence, breathing, and then, at the very end, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She listened to it once, deleted it, and lay on her back in the dark and looked at the ceiling for 2 hours. The second night, no voicemail, just the ring. The third night, no call at all. That was when she understood, because she did understand men a little, that he had decided to stop calling because he had decided her silence meant he should stop. And he was the kind of man who was going to interpret her silence exactly the way she had meant it, and then hate himself for doing the thing she had asked him to do. Which was the problem with Adrian in miniature. He kept getting it right in ways that felt, to her, like getting it wrong. So on the fourth day, she texted him. She wrote, "We need to talk." She deleted it. She wrote, "Are you okay?" She deleted it. She wrote, "I'm still angry." She deleted it. She wrote finally, "Parkside. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Buy your own coffee." She hit send before she could delete it. He answered in 40 seconds. "I'll be there." Bete. He was there at 1:45. She walked in at 5 after 2 and he was already in the back booth, the same booth. In a dark blue sweater she had never seen before, hair a little longer than the last time, and she did not know what to do with the small jolt that went through her chest when she saw him, so she ignored it. She slid into the booth across from him. Their knees bumped under the table. Neither of them apologized. "You look tired," she said. "I haven't been sleeping." Shocking. He flinched a little. She felt bad about it. She was glad she felt bad about it. It meant she wasn't a monster yet. Denise came over. She looked at Adrian. She looked at Lena. She looked back at Adrian with an expression that said, "Whatever you did, fix it." And then she said, "Coffee, you two?" "Please," Lena said. "Please," he said. Denise left. Lena put her hands flat on the table. "I'm going to say some things," she said. "I need you to not interrupt me. I need you to not apologize while I'm saying them. You can apologize when I'm done. Is that okay?" "Yes." "Okay." She took a breath. "I'm not angry that you helped Mrs. Hawthorne. I was, a little, for about an hour, but I got over it. She's 68 years old and she was going to lose her business, and you had the money, and you had it. That's fine. That's a good thing. I don't want to take that away from you. What I'm angry about is that you didn't tell me. And I think you didn't tell me because some part of you, maybe a small part, maybe a part you don't even know is there, knew that if you told me, I might say don't, and then you'd have to choose between doing what I wanted and doing what you wanted. And you didn't want to have to make that choice. So you took it away from me by just doing it, and that's the part I can't." Her voice caught. She took a sip of water. She kept going. "That's the part I can't let slide. Because I'm 22, Adrian. I don't have a lot. I don't have money. I don't have a career yet. I don't have a father. I have a grandmother and an acceptance letter and a job at a bookstore. And that's almost my whole net worth. And the one thing I do have is my say-so over my own life. And you reached in and took a piece of it without asking. And even if you did it because you loved me, which I think you did, it still counts. It still counts, Adrian. You don't get a pass on that because your intentions were good. My mother used to say intentions are the cheapest thing a person owns." She stopped. He didn't say anything. He was looking at her. His eyes were a little wet, which she was not prepared for, and she had to look down at the water glass for a second to keep her own from doing anything embarrassing. "Now you can talk," she said. He didn't, not right away. He took a breath. He let it out. "You're right," he said. "Okay. About all of it. Okay. I've been trying to figure out for 4 days how much of it was protecting you, and how much of it was me not wanting to be told no, and I think it's more of the second than I want to admit. Yeah, I'm used to fixing things. When I see a problem, I write a check, or I make a call, or I do the thing. And with you, I can't write a check to fix the fact that you're going to Boston. I can't write a check to fix the fact that I'm..." He gestured vaguely at himself. "I'm 23 years older than you, and my life's a mess, and my company's on fire, and I don't know how any of this ends. So when I saw a problem I could fix, Mrs. Hawthorne, the store, I fixed it. And I told myself it was for you. And some of it was. But some of it was so I could. He stopped. So you could what? She said. So I could feel like I wasn't useless. She looked at him. Adrian, she said quietly. Yeah, you're not useless. I know. Do you? He didn't answer that one. Denise came back with the coffees. She set them down without saying anything. She touched Lena's shoulder very lightly, which Lena understood as a kind of permission slip, and she went away. The company, Lena said. Yeah. How bad is it, really? He looked at her over the cup. Bad, he said. Bad like the journal bad. Or bad like I might not have a company in 6 months. Oh. Yeah. Adrian? I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to. I didn't want it to be a reason you stayed? Left. She set her cup down. I'm not leaving because your company's in trouble. I know. I'm going to Boston because I got into a program that I worked for 3 years, and you don't get that kind of acceptance twice. I know, Lena. I'm not leaving you. I know that too. There was a silence. Outside on 13th, a woman was trying to fold an umbrella against the wind and losing. How do we do this? Lena said, finally. What? This. Long distance. Us. I don't know how people do it. I've never dated anyone long enough to need to know. Neither have I. You were married for 9 years. That's not the same. Fair. He set down his cup. He reached across the table, not all the way, just to the middle, palm up. She looked at it for a second. Then she put her hand on his. We talk every night, he said, like we already do. I come up to Boston when I can. You come down when you can. We try. And when it gets hard, what? When it gets hard, we say it's hard. We don't go quiet. That's the thing that killed my marriage. We went quiet. We got good at going quiet. By the end, we could go 2 weeks without. He stopped. Anyway, we don't do that. That's the rule. That's a good rule. Yeah. I have a rule too. Okay? No more buying things. Lena, I mean it, Adrian. Not for me, not around me. No more Mrs. Hawthorns, no more surprise paperback stacks at the register, no more overpaying by a factor of 6. If you want to help someone, you ask me first. If you want to help me, you ask me, every time. I don't care if it's a coffee or a building. Okay? Say it. I won't buy you anything without asking. Okay. She took her hand back. She picked up her coffee. She took a sip. It was weak. It was always weak at the Parkside. We're okay? He said. We're okay for now. That's a qualified answer. It's a qualified relationship, Adrian. He actually smiled at that. A little. She smiled back. A little. It did not feel the way it had felt the first time she had smiled at him across this table, but it felt like something. It felt like two people who were going to try. Oh. She left for Boston on the 17th of January, on a Saturday morning, with 2 suitcases and a duffel bag and a plastic tub of books. Ruth came down to Penn Station with her. Adrian did not. She had asked him not to. She wanted to remember leaving by herself the way she had planned to leave before he had ever walked into her life. Ruth held on to her for a long time on the platform. Ruth was not a hugger. Ruth was a shoulder squeezer, a hand patter, a forehead kisser. But that morning on the platform, she put both of her thin arms around Lena's neck and held on. And Lena felt the small, dry weight of her grandmother against her chest and thought, with a sharpness that almost buckled her knees, this is the first time I've ever left her alone. You call me Sunday, Ruth said into her coat. I'll call you tonight. Call me Sunday. And every Sunday. Every Sunday, Graham. And you eat. Don't get up there and forget to eat. Graduate school girls forget to eat. I'll eat. Lena. Yes. You're going to do beautiful things. She didn't cry on the train. She waited until she was an hour into Connecticut, with her forehead against the cold glass and the gray Connecticut shoreline blurring past. And then she cried for about 10 minutes, quietly, in the seat, the way she had cried on the floor of her room 3 weeks ago. the way she had been taught by grief to cry, without sound. The program was good. The program was hard, and she was often out of her depth, and 3 of the other 11 students in her cohort had gone to Yale and said so approximately every 15 minutes, and she hated one of her professors and was afraid of another one and was in something like love with a third. But the program was good. She could feel it working on her. She could feel her sentences getting tighter. She could feel the shape of her own writing coming into focus the way a print does in the chemical bath, slowly and then all at once. Adrian came up the first weekend in February. He took the Acela. He stayed at a hotel. He did not stay with her, even though she offered. The apartment she was subletting in Alston was a railroad 3-bedroom with 2 strangers, one of whom played the banjo badly and often, and she had warned him. He came to the apartment anyway for dinner, and he ate pasta she had overcooked, and he met her roommates. And he was, to her great surprise, entirely normal. He was a man in a sweater eating pasta in a small apartment in Boston, and he laughed at the banjo boy's jokes. And he did not once bring up anything about himself that would have made the room tilt. On Sunday morning, before he took the train back, they walked along the Charles. It was 20 degrees out. The river was half frozen. She had her hand in his coat pocket because she had forgotten her gloves in New York. "This is working," he said. "Is it?" "I think so. I hope so." "Me too." "How long until you know you were right to come here?" She thought about it. "I think I already know," she said. He squeezed her hand inside his pocket. They parted at South Station. He got on the train. She went back to Alston on the T and spent the afternoon writing a short story in which nothing happened to anyone, which was exactly what she wanted to write. Things were good for 6 weeks. Then the thing with the company broke. She read about it in the Times on a Tuesday morning, sitting at the small round table in her kitchen with a mug of coffee and the laptop open. The headline was Wolf Holdings in Talks for Emergency Restructuring, Board Pressures CEO, and there was a photograph of him leaving a building in Midtown with his head down. And the first 2 paragraphs were bad, and the next 3 paragraphs were worse. She called him. "Hey," he said. His voice was rough. It was 6 in the morning on the East Coast and he was already awake, which told her everything about the last several days she needed to know. "Why didn't you tell me? It happened fast." "Adrian, I'm going to be fine. Your company is going to be fine, or you are going to be fine. Both, probably, maybe." "Oh, Adrian, I didn't want you to worry, Lena. I don't want this to be your problem. You have your stories to write, and you have your program, and I don't want—" "Stop." "What?" "Stop telling me what you want me to have. Tell me what's happening." He told her. It took 40 minutes. She sat at the kitchen table and listened, and she drank her coffee, and when her coffee was cold, she drank it cold. He told her about the investor who had pulled out, about the board member who had called for his resignation, about the meeting the day before, which had run from 2 p.m. until almost midnight, and which had ended, he said, with a tentative plan that he could live with but did not love. About his ex-wife, Celeste, who had called him, unprompted, 2 nights ago, and had said, he said this part flatly, without inflection, that she was worried about him and that she had always thought they had given up too fast, and that if he wanted to come over and just talk, he could. Lena was quiet for a long time. "Are you going to?" she said. "No." "Adrian." "No, Lena." "You can tell me if you are." "I'm not." I told her no. I told her I was seeing someone. I told her a lot of things, but mostly I told her no. "Okay." "I should have told you when she called." "Yes, you should have." "I'm telling you now." "I know." "Are we?" "Yes," she said. "We're okay, but you have to keep telling me things. You can't go quiet. That was the rule. I know." "Adrian." "Yes. I love you." It was the first time she had said it. She hadn't planned to say it then. She said it, and then she set the mug down very carefully on the table, and she listened. "I love you too," he said. "I've loved you since the Parkside. I've been trying to figure out how to say it for 4 months." "That's not fair." "What isn't?" "You got to say it second, which is easier." "Next time I'll go first." "Next time." "Yeah." They hung up not long after. She sat at the table. She looked out the window. A man was walking a very small dog in a very large coat down the street. She watched him for a long time. She did not feel the way she had thought she would feel after saying it. She had thought she would feel light. She did not feel light. She felt the way you feel when you've signed a lease, committed, slightly breathless, aware that the furniture was going to be hard to move. She missed her period the third week of March. She didn't think about it at first. She was stressed. She hadn't been eating. Her body had done weird things before. The year her mother died, it had skipped 3 periods in a row, and the pediatrician had called it grief, and had not been wrong. She didn't worry. She missed it the 4th week too. She bought a test at a CVS in Harvard Square on a Saturday night in April at 10 p.m. because she didn't want anyone she knew to see her in the drugstore at a reasonable hour. She paid cash. She walked back to the apartment with the test in a plastic bag inside her backpack. She took it in the bathroom with the door locked and the fan on and the banjo going somewhere down the hall. 2 lines. She sat on the edge of the tub for a long time. She looked at the test. She took another one from the same box. They came in 2s, and it said the same thing, which she had known it would. She sat on the edge of the tub until her legs went numb. Then she got up. She put the tests in the plastic bag. She put the plastic bag in her backpack. She went into her room and she closed the door and she sat on her bed and she put her hand very lightly on her own stomach. She thought, I have to call him. She thought, not tonight. She thought then of the Times article, of the photograph of him leaving the building, of the word restructuring, which was a business page word for burning house. She thought of Celeste in the apartment uptown, calling to just talk. She thought of the press who had followed him in the rain outside Hawthorne and Sons 5 months ago, when he had been a man with problems who still had his footing. She thought of the board meeting that had ended at midnight. She thought of the 4 hours of sleep. She thought of the sentence he had said to her quietly on the phone on Tuesday morning. I'm going to be fine. Probably. Maybe. She thought of her mother, who had been 23 when she had gotten pregnant with Lena, and who had spent the rest of her life, 24 years, all of them, working 2 jobs and coming home tired and turning the TV on and eating dinner off a plate on her lap. Lena had always understood, in some wordless way, that her mother had loved her fiercely and had also some days been bewildered by her and by the life having her had made. Her mother had told her once, on the bad side of a bad week, I wouldn't trade you for anything, baby. Don't ever think I would. I just didn't. I didn't know it was going to be this much. And Lena had been 12, and she had not understood. And now, at 22, she did. She would not do that to Adrian. She would not be a thing that happened to him while he was trying not to drown. She would not pick up the phone and say, I am pregnant to a man who was already, she could hear in his voice, hanging on by his hands, and watch him do what he would absolutely do, which was say all the right things, and come to Boston the next morning on the first train, and stand in her kitchen and promise her everything, and mean every word of it, and then spend the next 6 months being torn in half by a company he had built for 20 years, and a girl he had known for 5 months, and a baby neither of them had planned. She would not do it. Not yet. Not now. She put the tests in the bottom of her backpack, under her notebooks, and she went to bed, and she did not sleep until almost 4. When he called on Monday night at 11, she picked up on the second ring, and she made her voice light, and they talked for 40 minutes about a book he was reading that she had recommended, and she did not tell him, and when they hung up, she put the phone face down on the bed next to her, and she lay in the dark with both hands on her stomach, and she stared at the ceiling. The next 2 weeks, she called him less. He noticed by Wednesday of the first week. He mentioned it, carefully, on Friday. You sound far away, he said. I'm just busy. There's a workshop deadline. Okay. I'm fine, Adrian. Are you? Yes. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, Okay, Lena. She hated the way he said, okay. He had said okay to her across the table at the Parkside 4 months ago when she had told him every rule she could think of, and he had said it then the way he said it now, which was the voice of a man who was deciding not to push, and who was very aware that he was deciding. He had been taught, by being wrong once, not to push. She was using it against him. She knew she was. She could not stop. The 3rd week of April, she nearly told him. She had called him on a Sunday morning, and he had sounded tired, and he had mentioned, in passing, that the restructuring plan had hit another wall, and that he was flying to London on Wednesday to meet with a group of investors who were, in his words, the last real option. And she had opened her mouth to say it, "Adrian, I'm pregnant." And what had come out instead was, "Okay, be safe." And she had hung up, and she had gone into the bathroom, and she had thrown up, which was becoming a regular morning event. Ruth called her that afternoon. "Baby," Ruth said, "you haven't called me in 2 Sundays." "I know. I'm sorry, Graham." "You sick?" "A little. A little. Just a cold." There was a long silence on the line. Ruth had been in silences on the phone with Lena for Lena's entire life, and Lena had always thought of those silences as weather. They came, they went. You didn't do anything about them. She had forgotten, for a moment, that Ruth did do things with silences. Ruth used silences the way a fisherman used a line. "Lena," Ruth said. "Yeah." "You tell me right now if you need me to come up there." "I don't." "You tell me." "Graham, I don't." Lena. She couldn't. She couldn't do it. Not on the phone. Not to her grandmother, who was 76 years old, who had raised her alone, who had waited at Penn Station for her on that January morning and held her like she might break. "I'm fine, Graham. I'm stressed. It's the program. It's a lot." A long, long silence. Then Ruth said very quietly, "Okay, baby. Okay, you call me on Sunday." "I will." "Promise." "I promise." She hung up. She sat on the bed. She looked at her hands, and they were shaking. She did not call on Sunday. She did not call the Sunday after that. She was supposed to go home for a weekend at the beginning of May, and she canceled 2 days before, saying her advisor had moved a deadline. Adrian had been planning to take the train up and meet her in New York at Ruth's apartment for dinner. The 3 of them, the first time all 3 of them would be in a room. And she canceled that too, with a text she rewrote 6 times and still hated when she sent it. "I'm sorry. The work is really bad this week. Let's push it to June." He wrote back, "Okay. Take care of yourself. I love you." He did not call at 11 that night. He did not call the next night either. It took her 48 hours to realize he was doing the thing he had done back in November when she had gone quiet on him after the bookstore. He was giving her space because she had asked him to give her space without asking, and she had asked him to give her space because she couldn't do anything else. And the 2 of them, between them, had constructed a perfectly sealed room in which nothing could reach either one of them, and in which she was, increasingly, alone with a secret that was growing inside her at the rate of about 1 millimeter a day. On the 12th of May, she woke up at 6 a.m. and threw up before she got out of bed. She lay on the bathroom floor with her cheek against the cold tile, and she thought, with a calm that she would later remember as almost unbearable, "I cannot do this by myself for much longer." She didn't call Adrian, she called Ruth. "Graham," she said when her grandmother picked up. "Graham, I have to tell you something." "Tell me." Can you sit down first? Lena Joy Carter, you tell me what is wrong." So she told her. She told her everything, the test, the 2 tests, the 3 months, the reason she had stopped calling, the reason she had canceled the weekend, the reason she couldn't tell him, the sentence about probably, maybe, the mother on the kitchen floor, the 23-year-old mother who hadn't known it was going to be this much. Ruth did not interrupt her. When she was done, there was a long silence. And then Ruth said, in a voice that was not gentle, but was not angry either. That was in fact nothing Lena had ever heard from her grandmother before. A voice that sounded a little like a door closing. "Baby, you listen to me. You get on a train on Friday and you come home. You come home to this apartment. You sleep in your old bed. And on Saturday morning, you and I are going to sit at this kitchen table, and we are going to figure out what you want to do. Not what he wants. Not what his company wants. Not what I want. What you want. Do you hear me?" "Yes." "And then, baby, then what, Graham? Then you are going to tell that man. Because he has a right to know. Whatever you decide, he has a right to know. And if you will not tell him, I will. Because I am 76 years old and I have buried my daughter. And I'm not going to stand here and watch you live the next 50 years inside a lie because you were too scared to use the phone." Lena didn't answer. She couldn't. She lay on the tile floor with the phone pressed to her ear, and she listened to her grandmother breathe on the other end of the line, and she understood that the thing she had been holding off for 5 weeks had just arrived, and it had arrived, the way these things did, from the direction she had not been watching. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, Graham. Okay. Friday. Friday. I love you, baby. I love you too." She hung up. She lay on the tile. The sun came up over Alston, thin and cold, through the bathroom window, and somewhere in the apartment the banjo boy started practicing, very badly. The opening bars of a song she had heard 100 times and still could not name, and Lena Carter, 22 years old and 11 weeks pregnant, closed her eyes against the light and waited for her body to decide whether it was going to get up. She got on the train Friday at 3 in the afternoon. She hadn't packed much. A duffel with 3 days of clothes, her toothbrush, the plastic bag from the CVS in Harvard Square still at the bottom of her backpack, the 2 tests inside it, both still wrapped in tissue, like small dead things she hadn't figured out how to throw away. She sat by the window on the right side of the train because that was the side with the water, and somewhere between Providence and Kingston she put both hands flat on her stomach under her coat, and she left them there for the rest of the trip. Ruth met her at Penn Station. Lena saw her from a long way off. The small white-haired woman in the navy coat she had owned since 2003, standing just past the turnstiles with her hands in her pockets and her chin up, the way Ruth stood when she was trying not to look worried. Lena walked toward her and dropped the duffel, and Ruth opened her arms without saying anything, and Lena went into them, and Ruth held her the way she had held her on this same platform in January, except that January had been a goodbye, and this was something else, and they both knew it. "Let's get you home," Ruth said into her hair. "Okay, Graham." "You eat on the train?" "No." They took the subway. Lena offered to get a cab. She had $60 in her wallet, which was a lot of money for her, but not, in the context of the day, very much. And Ruth looked at her like she had suggested they rent a helicopter. And so they took the 2, and then the B, and then they walked the 4 blocks from the Church Avenue stop to the apartment, slowly, because Ruth's knees were not what they used to be, and because neither of them was in any hurry. The apartment smelled the way it always did. Garlic and old books, and the lavender Ruth kept in a sachet in the linen closet. Lena stood in the kitchen doorway with her duffel at her feet, and she closed her eyes for a second, and she thought, "I am home. I am home." "Go lie down," Ruth said. "I'll make you something. You've got circles under your eyes like a raccoon." "Graham, go lie down, baby." She went. Her old bedroom was exactly the way she had left it. The corkboard, the IKEA desk, the twin bed with the quilt Ruth had made for her the summer she was 16. She lay down on top of the quilt without taking off her coat or her shoes, and she was asleep within about 3 minutes, and she did not wake up until 9:30 that night, when Ruth came in and sat on the edge of the bed and said gently, "Baby, come eat." She ate at the kitchen table, rice and beans, fried chicken, a small plate of cucumbers cut the way Ruth always cut them, in thick rounds with too much salt. She ate all of it. She hadn't known how hungry she was. Ruth sat across from her and drank a cup of tea and watched her eat, and did not say a single word about any of it, which Lena understood, in some wordless animal way, as mercy. When she was done, Ruth took the plate. She washed it at the sink. She dried her hands on the dish towel with the rooster on it that had been hanging on the oven handle since before Lena was born. She turned around. "Tomorrow morning," Ruth said. "You and me. This table. 9 o'clock. "Okay." "Sleep, baby." "Okay, Chan." She woke up at 7. She lay in bed for a long time listening to the apartment. Ruth moving around in the kitchen, the radiator, a car alarm going off 2 blocks away, and then going quiet. At 8 she got up. She showered. She stood under the water for a long time with her forehead against the tile. She put her hand on her stomach. She could almost, if she paid attention, feel the small firmness under the skin that had not been there 2 months ago. She had been trying not to pay attention. It was getting harder. At 9 she came out into the kitchen in the sweatpants and t-shirt she had slept in, and Ruth was at the table with 2 cups of coffee and a yellow legal pad, and there was a pen lying across the top of the pad. And Lena sat down and looked at the legal pad and then at her grandmother and said, "What is that?" "That's what we're going to do. With a legal pad. Your grandfather used to say any real decision had to be made on paper, otherwise your feelings voted twice." "Okay." Ruth pushed the pad across the table. You're going to write down, she said, at the top, what I want. Not what you think you should want. Not what Adrian wants. Not what I want. What you want. And then we're going to sit here until you have it. Graham, I'm not asking, Lena. She took the pen. She wrote, what I want. She stopped. She stared at the page for a long time. Ruth drank her coffee. The refrigerator hummed. Outside somewhere, a kid was bouncing a ball against a wall, the sound of it slow and even, like a clock. Lena wrote slowly, I want to keep the baby. She looked at it. She had not known she was going to write that. She had been planning, in some vague and defensive way, to write down all the options and weigh them like a grown-up. She had not been planning to know, but she had written it, and her hand had not shaken. And when she looked at it on the paper, she felt something settle in her chest that had been loose for weeks. She wrote, I want to finish the program. I want to be near Graham. She stopped. She looked at the page. She looked at Ruth. Keep going, Ruth said. Graham, if I write the next thing I'm going to write, you have to promise me you won't give me a face. I'm 76 years old. I've earned my faces. Graham, write it, baby. She wrote, I want Adrian. She put the pen down. Ruth read it upside down, which Ruth could do. Ruth had been reading things upside down across kitchen tables for longer than Lena had been alive. Ruth read the whole list slowly, and then Ruth took a sip of her coffee and she set the cup down. And she said, Okay. Okay? Okay, that's the list. Now we make the plan. Graham, don't I want to what, Lena? Don't you want to talk about whether... No. Graham, no, baby. That's your list. That's yours. I'm not going to sit at this table and make you defend it. You wrote it. It's real. Now we figure out how to get you all 4 things. Lena started crying. She hadn't seen it coming. She had been fine 90 seconds ago. It came on her like weather. 1 second dry, the next second drenched. And she put her face in her hands and she cried, hard, sitting at her grandmother's kitchen table. And Ruth let her. Ruth did not get up. Ruth did not pat her. Ruth sat across from her with her small dry hands around her coffee cup, and Ruth waited. When Lena was done, Ruth said, You're going to call him. Okay. Today. Okay. You're going to tell him on the phone, not in a room. Because a woman needs room to leave when she says a thing like this, in case she needs to leave. You're not going to be cornered in a room with a man in a sentence like that. Okay. And then, baby? Then you're going to let him come here, to this apartment, to this table. Because if he's going to be in this with you, he's going to be in it in the place you live, with the people who raised you, and he's going to sit in that chair you're sitting in, and he's going to look me in the face, and we are going to see what kind of a man he is when he has to look a 76-year-old woman in the face and say what he is going to do. Graham, I'm not being dramatic. I'm being practical. I know. Ruth reached across the table and took Lena's hand and squeezed it. Her hand was the same hand it had always been. Lena was aware suddenly, as she sometimes was, of how small it was. She had been bigger than Ruth since she was 15, and she had never gotten used to it. Okay, Graham. Go call him. Now? Now is better than later. Later is how we got here. She called him from her old bedroom, sitting on the edge of the twin bed with the door closed. It was just after 10 on Saturday morning. He was probably awake. He was always awake. He answered on the first ring. Lena? Hi. Hi. Hi, are you okay? I thought you canceled this weekend. I came home. To New York? Yeah. A pause. Okay, he said. Okay. Do you want me to come over? Not yet. I have to tell you something first. Tell me. Adrian? Tell me, Lena. She took a breath. She put her free hand on her stomach, on top of the t-shirt. I'm pregnant. There was a silence on the line. A long one. She counted it. She counted to 6, to 7, to 8. She could hear him breathing. She could not tell from the breathing anything about what was happening on the other end. How long? He said finally. His voice was very quiet. 11 weeks. Almost 12. 11. Yes. Another silence. You've known for, a month. About a month. A month. Adrian. You've known for a month. Yes. He didn't say anything for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was not angry. She would not have known what to do if it had been angry. It was something worse. It was the voice of a man who was holding something heavy and had decided not to put it down where she could see it. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were, Adrian, you were the company. London, Celeste, you were drowning. Lena, I couldn't put this on top of that. I couldn't watch you try to carry both. You didn't let me try. What? You didn't let me try. You decided what I could carry. You decided without me. She closed her eyes. Yes, she said. I did. Lena, I'm sorry. Do you know what I've been doing for the last month? Do you know, I've been sitting in hotel rooms thinking you were falling out of love with me. I've been on 4. His voice broke a little and came back. I've been on 4 planes in the last 3 weeks, and every single one of them, I sat there thinking I was losing you. I thought I was losing you, Lena. I thought I had done something, and I couldn't figure out what it was, because you wouldn't tell me what it was. And I kept telling myself to be patient, to give you space, because you told me once not to push. And, Adrian, and now you tell me it was this. It was this the whole time. Yes. Lena, I'm sorry, Adrian. He was quiet again. She could hear in the background the hum of a car. He was in a car. He was always in a car. Are you okay? He said. Yes, physically. Yes. Have you been to a doctor? Not yet. Lena, I know, I'm going to. On Monday. I have an appointment at the clinic on Flatbush on Monday. Okay? Adrian. Yes. I want to keep the baby. A silence. Then, okay. Okay? Okay, Lena, okay. Just okay? What do you want me to say? I don't know. I thought you might. Lena, I've wanted a child for 15 years. She hadn't known that. She had not known that. She sat on the edge of the bed with the phone against her ear, and she realized, with something between relief and grief, that there were still very large facts about Adrian Wolfe that she did not know, and that at some point in the last month she had started to believe, without examining the belief, that she knew everything about him she was going to know. She had been telling herself a story about what he could handle, and the story had been wrong, and the story had cost her 4 weeks. I didn't know that, she said. I know. You never told me. I didn't know how. Celeste, it was a whole thing. I didn't know how to bring it up with you. I thought there would be time. Oh. Lena. Yes. Where are you right now? Grams? Can I come? She thought about it. She thought about what Ruth had said. A woman needs room to leave. And she understood now that Ruth had not meant leaving the room. Ruth had meant leaving the sentence, leaving the moment, leaving the shape of the life she had been about to set down. She had said the sentence now. She could not unsay it. The room, in that sense, was a different room. Yet that, she said. Come, Graham wants to meet you. Properly. Okay? Adrian. Yes. She's going to be hard on you. I hope so. No, Adrian, I mean it. She's going to be hard on you. She is not. She's not impressed by any of it, by the money, by the name. She is going to sit across from you and look at you the way she looks at produce at the market, and she is going to decide. And whatever she decides, that's what my life is going to look like for the next 40 years. So please, Adrian, please. Please what, Lena? Please, don't be the man I met in the bookstore. Be the man from the parkside. Be the man who sat across from me and said he didn't sleep. Be that one. Be that one for her. A long silence. Then he said, Okay. Say it like you mean it. I'll be that one, Lena. Okay. What time? Come at 6. Ruth's making dinner. Okay. Adrian. Yes. I love you. I love you too. I love you too. I'm going to hang up now, Lena, because I'm about to say some things that are going to be a lot. And I don't want to say them into a phone. I'm going to come over and I'm going to say them in person. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. He hung up. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time with the phone in her lap. Her face was wet. She hadn't noticed. She wiped it with the sleeve of her t-shirt. She went back into the kitchen. Ruth was still at the table. Ruth looked up. He's coming at 6, Lena said. He knows. Ruth nodded once. All right, Ruth said. I'll make the chicken. He came at 5:45. He was wearing a sweater she had never seen before, a plain gray one, not expensive looking, which she realized later he had probably picked on purpose, and jeans, and he was holding two things, a paper bag from the Portuguese bakery on Coney Island Avenue, and a small bunch of yellow tulips still in the brown paper the bodega on the corner wrapped them in. He had gotten off the train at church. He had not taken a car. She did not know how she knew he had not taken a car, but she knew. He came up the stairs. She opened the door before he knocked. They looked at each other in the hallway for about 4 seconds without saying anything. Then he said, Hi. Hi, sir. Can I? Yes. She stepped back. He came in. He stood in the tiny foyer in his sneakers on the mat, holding the bakery bag and the tulips, and he looked, for the first time since she had known him, like a person she was not 100% sure of, like a man showing up to take a test he had not been given time to study for. She put her hand on his arm. It's okay, she said. It's okay. Come on, come. Ruth was in the kitchen doorway. She was wearing her good house coat, the dark green one with the small embroidered collar, which Lena had only seen her wear to funerals, and on the afternoon the Jehovah's Witnesses came. She stood in the doorway with a dish towel in one hand, and she looked at Adrian Wolfe, and Adrian Wolfe looked at her, and Lena held her breath. Mr. Wolfe, Ruth said. Mrs. Carter, you brought tulips. Yes, ma'am. She took the tulips. She took the bakery bag. She turned around and went back into the kitchen, and Adrian looked at Lena, and Lena made a small come-on gesture with her head, and they followed. Dinner was roast chicken and rice and collards. Ruth had made the collards the long way, with the smoked turkey wings simmered in the pot all afternoon. Adrian sat in the chair that Lena's grandfather had sat in from 1986 until 1994, and that no one had sat in since. And he did not know that, and Lena did not tell him, because Ruth had not told her to, and Lena understood that his not knowing was part of the test. Ruth did not talk about the baby for the first 20 minutes. She asked him about Pittsburgh. She asked him about his father. She asked him, with the precise and slightly deadly politeness she had honed over 30 years of answering telephones in a hospital billing office, about his company, and whether it was in the kind of trouble that the kind of man who brought tulips to the grandmother of his pregnant girlfriend should be in. He answered her. He answered her honestly. He told her about the London trip, about the emergency restructuring, about the investor who had pulled out, about the board member who wanted him gone. He did not soften it. And now, Ruth said, now there's a plan. It's not the plan I wanted. I'm going to lose my position as CEO. I'm going to stay on the board. The company will survive. I'll take a hit, financially, a big one. I won't. He paused and looked at Lena and then back at Ruth. I won't be what I was. On paper. You'll still have money, though. Yes, a lot, by most standards. Less than I had. How much less? Ruth, Lena said. It's all right, Adrian said. About half, Mrs. Carter. Maybe a little more than half. Ruth cut a piece of chicken. She chewed it. She swallowed. I don't care about the money, Mr. Wolfe. I didn't think you did. I want you to understand that. I do. I want you to understand that because I want you to understand what I do care about. Okay. Ruth set down her fork. I raised Lena since she was 14 years old. I buried my daughter at 47. I'm not going to bury my granddaughter at 22. I'm not going to watch her disappear into somebody else's life and come out the other end somebody I don't recognize. Are we clear? Yes, ma'am. I don't know you, Mr. Wolfe. I don't know what kind of a man you are. I know what she tells me, and I know what I read in the papers, and those two stories don't exactly agree. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and you are going to answer me. And if you lie to me, I am going to know, because I have been lied to by professionals for 50 years. Yes, ma'am. Do you love her? Yes. Do you want this baby? Yes. Are you going to marry her? There was a pause, not a long one. Lena felt it, though. She felt the air in the kitchen change. If she'll have me, Adrian said. Yes. Not as a fix. No, ma'am. Because I'll tell you right now, Mr. Wolf, if you marry her as a fix, if you marry her because there's a baby, she will smell it on you for the rest of her life. And the baby will smell it on you, and there's nothing in this world worse than being a child who knows he was the reason. Ruth, Lena said. I know, Mrs. Carter, Adrian said. I'd marry her if there was no baby. I was planning to ask her when she graduated. I've had the ring since March. Lena put her fork down. What? She said. He looked at her. He looked like a man who had not meant to say that, and was now realizing he had said it, and was deciding to keep going because he had to. I've had the ring since March, he said. It's in the bottom drawer of my desk. I wasn't going to ask you now. I was going to wait. I didn't want you to feel like the timing was... Adrian, yes. We can talk about this later. Okay. But, okay. Ruth made a small sound in her throat that was not quite a laugh. All right, Ruth said. All right, Mr. Wolf, one more question. Yes, ma'am. The bookstore. Yes. Explain it to me. He looked down at his plate for a second. He set down his fork. I was wrong to do it the way I did it, he said. I should have told her. I didn't tell her because I was afraid she would say don't, and I was afraid that if she said don't, I would have to choose between doing what she asked and doing what I thought was right, and I didn't want to have to choose. So I took the choice away from her, which was a small version of the thing I'm trying not to do ever with her. It was the small version, and I did it anyway. I've been sitting with that for 6 months. I haven't been good company to myself about it. Ruth looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up her fork, and she took another bite of chicken, and she chewed it, and she said without looking up, Eat your food before it gets cold, Mr. Wolf. After dinner, Ruth went into the living room and turned on Murder. She wrote at low volume, and Lena and Adrian washed the dishes. He washed. She dried. They had never washed dishes together before. I'm sorry, she said quietly while he was rinsing a plate, for not telling you. I'm sorry I didn't notice faster. You noticed. I lied to you when you noticed. Okay. Okay? Okay, Lena. Okay. Are we done apologizing? Are we? I'm tired of it. I want to be done. Me too. He set the plate in the drying rack. He dried his hands on the dish towel with the rooster. He turned to face her. Boston, he said. Yeah. You have a year left. A year and a half. Okay. Adrian. Let me talk, okay? Let me just say this once, and then you tell me if I'm being an idiot. Okay. He took a breath. I'm going to lose the CEO job. It's going to happen in the next 6 weeks. After that, I don't have to be in New York every day. I don't have to be anywhere every day. I can be where you are for a year and a half, and then after. And I can help with the baby. I can help with Ruth. I can be in it. All of it. And I don't need you to quit anything. I don't need you to come back early. I don't need you to be less than you were going to be. I need the opposite of that. I need you to keep being exactly what you were going to be, and I'll come around that. I'll build around that. She looked at him. You'd move to Boston. For a year and a half, yes. You'd live in Boston. Yes. Adrian, your entire life is in New York. My entire life is you. Oh, that's too much? A little. I know. She laughed in a wet way, and she put her hand over her mouth. She hadn't meant to. He looked at her, a little worried, and then he reached out very slowly and put his hand on her cheek, and she leaned into it, and she closed her eyes. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay, come to Boston. But Adrian, yes, we are not getting married this year. Okay. Not because I don't want to, because I want to finish my degree before I sign anything that changes my name. That's fair. And because my grandmother was right. If we do it now, the baby will know. Okay. But someday, yes. Someday, yes. He kissed her in Ruth Carter's kitchen in Brooklyn, with his hand still on her cheek and the rooster dish towel hanging on the oven handle behind him. And in the living room, Jessica Fletcher was solving a murder at low volume. And outside on Church Avenue, a bus sighed to a stop and started up again. And Lena Carter, 22 years old, almost 12 weeks pregnant, finishing her MFA in Boston in a year and a half, finally put both hands on the front of his sweater and held on. When they came out of the kitchen, Ruth was in her chair pretending to watch television. She did not look at them. She did not ask them anything. She said to the TV, "You two figure out your business?" "Yes, Graham." Mr. Wolf?" "Yes, ma'am." "You staying tonight?" "No, ma'am. I'll go home. I'll come back tomorrow, if that's all right." "That's all right. Be here at 10. We're going to the clinic with her on Monday." "Yes, ma'am." He left at 9:30. He walked to the subway. He had offered Lena a car, which she had declined on his behalf, because she knew Ruth was watching and because she understood now that there were going to be a great many small tests over the next several months, and it would be better for everyone if he kept passing them. She stood at the window and watched him walk to the corner in his gray sweater, hands in his pockets, head down against a wind that wasn't really there. And he turned at the corner and he was gone. She came away from the window. Ruth was still in her chair. She patted the arm of the couch next to her. Lena sat down. Ruth took her hand. Her hand was small and dry and warm. "You did good today, baby." "Did I?" "Yes." "He did okay, too." "He did. He did okay. I'll give him okay." "High praise, Graham." "Don't push it." Lena laughed a little. She put her head on Ruth's shoulder. On the television, Jessica Fletcher was talking to a sheriff about a footprint. Outside, the wind had come up. Lena closed her eyes. She thought about the yellow legal pad on the kitchen table, the 4 lines she had written. "I want to keep the baby. I want to finish the program. I want to be near Graham. I want Adrian." Somewhere, for the first time in 5 weeks, she allowed herself to believe it was a list she could actually have. The appointment at the clinic on Flatbush was on Monday at 11. Adrian came at 9, in a cab this time because it was raining, and he brought coffee for Ruth from the Greek place on the corner, which Ruth accepted without comment and drank without thanks, which Lena understood was a gesture of advancement. He sat in the living room while Lena got dressed. He made small talk with Ruth about the building's radiator, which had a known problem, and about the superintendent, whose name Adrian remembered from a conversation at dinner, and which Ruth noticed he remembered, and which moved him, incrementally, one more notch up her ladder. They took a cab to the clinic. The waiting room was crowded and fluorescent and smelled faintly of the industrial cleaner they used on the linoleum, and Lena sat between Adrian and Ruth on an orange plastic chair that was bolted to the floor, and she filled out forms on a clipboard, and she gave the forms back to the woman at the desk, and she sat and she waited, and Adrian held her hand and Ruth held the other hand, and none of the 3 of them said anything for almost 45 minutes. When they called her name, she stood up and Adrian stood up with her, and she said, "You come. Graham, you stay." "Okay, baby." "Okay." The ultrasound room was small and cool, and the monitor faced away from them until the technician turned it. The technician was a woman in her 50s with a kind face and a stud in her nose, and she said, "First one?" And Lena said, "Yes." And the technician nodded and said, "Okay, honey, this is going to be cold," and put the gel on her belly and moved the wand, and then she said, in a voice that was low and professional and a little warm, "There it is," and turned the screen. There it was. It was not much. It was a small gray comma on a dark background. It did not look like a baby. It did not look like anything Lena had previously called a baby in her mind. But there was a small flickering in the middle of the comma that the technician pointed to with the tip of her pen, and she said, "That's the heart." And Lena heard, somewhere outside of herself, the sound of Adrian breathing out hard through his nose, the way a man breathes when he is trying very specifically not to cry in front of a stranger, and she understood in that moment that whatever had been theoretical about this child was no longer theoretical to him. He squeezed her hand so hard it almost hurt. He didn't notice. She didn't tell him. "Heartbeat's 160, the technician said. "That's right where we want it. Everything looks good. You're measuring a little over 12 weeks. "Okay," Lena said. "You're going to be fine, honey." "Okay." She cried a little, on the table, with the paper crinkling under her back and the gel cold on her stomach, not out of sadness and not out of joy, but out of the simple exhausted relief of having been carrying something alone for 5 weeks and being done carrying it alone. Adrian put his forehead against the back of her hand. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He moved to Boston in July, after he stepped down as CEO of Wolf Holdings in a Monday morning announcement that the Times ran on page B3 under a headline Lena read twice and then stopped reading. He rented a small 2-bedroom in Brookline, a 10-minute walk from the T, on the second floor of a wood-frame house owned by a retired cardiologist and his wife, who did not, blessedly, recognize his name. It was the smallest place he had lived in since he was 24. He did not complain about it once. Lena kept her sublet for the summer and spent most nights at Brookline anyway. In August, when her lease was up, she moved in. She brought the plastic tub of books and 2 suitcases and the corkboard, and Adrian, who had not known what the corkboard was or why, helped her hang it above the desk in what would become, in January, the baby's room. And he stood back and looked at it and said, "What's on it?" And she said, "My life." And he said, "Okay." And he left it alone, which she noticed, and which she loved him for. Their son was born on the 5th of December at 4:12 in the morning at Beth Israel in Boston. The labor was 26 hours. It was not the kind of labor anyone tells you about in advance, because telling you in advance would, Lena suspected, end the species. Adrian was in the room the whole time. Ruth was in the waiting room the whole time. Ruth had taken the train up on the 2nd of December and had been sleeping on the couch in Brookline for 3 nights, which had been, somehow, the best 3 nights of Lena's pregnancy. They named him Isaiah, after Lena's grandfather, whom she had never met. His middle name was David, after Adrian's father. When the nurse put him on Lena's chest, he was red and furious and very small, and he was not, she thought, the most beautiful baby she had ever seen. She had told herself in advance that she would not be one of those women who lied about that. But he was hers, and when he wrapped his whole hand around the end of her index finger and held on, she understood that beauty was going to turn out to be a much larger word than she had previously thought. Adrian cried. He cried without any attempt to hide it this time, and Lena, who had been crying off and on for 26 hours, looked at him across the top of their son's head and said, "It's okay, Adrian?" And he laughed, a short, wrecked sound, and wiped his face with the back of his wrist and said, I know it's okay. I know." Ruth came in 20 minutes later. She walked to the bed and she looked down at the baby on Lena's chest and she said, without any ceremony, "Oh, baby, oh, look at you, look at you." She touched his head with one finger very lightly, the way she touched everything she loved. Then she looked at Adrian and she said, "Mr. Wolf." Ruth. She had been calling him Adrian since September. She had called him Mr. Wolf in the labor room on purpose, and Lena knew it, and Adrian knew it, and Ruth knew they knew it, which was the whole point. "You did good," Ruth said. "I didn't do anything, Ruth. She did everything." "You did the other thing." "What other thing?" "You stayed." She patted his shoulder once, which from Ruth was the equivalent of an embrace, and then she sat down in the chair by the window, and she didn't say another word for about an hour, and she looked at the baby the whole time, and Lena watched her watch him, and thought, that is the second happiest face I have ever seen on a human being. The first one is the one I can't see right now because it's mine. Adrian's family was a harder country. His mother had called twice in July and not called again. His sister, Margaret, who lived in Greenwich and had never approved of anything Adrian had done since roughly 1997, had sent a card in August that said congratulations in a way that managed, by font selection alone, to sound sarcastic. Celeste, the ex-wife, had not called at all, which Lena understood to be the most gracious thing Celeste was capable of and had accepted as such. His mother, her name was Eleanor, came up to Boston in February, when Isaiah was 8 weeks old, and Lena had been dreading it for 7 of those 8 weeks. Adrian had flown down to Pittsburgh for Christmas alone, with Lena's full blessing, to tell his mother in person about the baby and about Lena and about the shape of his life now, and he had come back quieter than he had left. And he had said, when Lena asked him how it had gone, "She needs time," and Lena had said, "Okay," and they had left it there for a while. But Eleanor came in February. She took the train. She stayed 3 days in a hotel, and she came to the apartment every morning at 10, and she sat on the couch in the small living room with her handbag on her lap and her coat folded on the arm of the couch, and she did not know what to do with herself. And Lena, who had been prepared for coldness, found herself, on the second morning, surprised by something else. Eleanor was afraid. Eleanor was 78 years old, and she had buried a husband, and she had watched her only son build a life she had not understood, and then lose large parts of it she had not understood either. And now she was in a small apartment in Brookline, looking at a daughter-in-law she hadn't met until 2 days ago, and a grandson she hadn't known was coming, and she was, Lena realized, afraid that she was going to do this wrong, and that Adrian would never forgive her, and that she would lose the last of the things she had left. On the third morning, Lena made coffee for both of them and sat down on the couch next to her, not in the chair across from her, which was what Lena had done the first 2 mornings, and put Isaiah, wrapped in the blue blanket Ruth had crocheted, into Eleanor's arms. Eleanor froze. I haven't held a baby in... It's okay, Eleanor. My hands aren't... You're fine. Look, he likes you. He likes... Isaiah did not like her particularly. Isaiah was 8 weeks old and liked very few things, and most of those were loud and on his mother. But he was asleep, and he was warm, and Eleanor's arms were, as it turned out, still arms that remembered how to hold a baby. And she sat there for about 10 minutes not saying anything, and then she said very quietly, Adrian looked like this. Yeah? He had more hair. Isaiah's going to have more, the nurse said. Eleanor looked down at the baby. She touched his cheek with her knuckle. I wasn't kind to you, she said, on the phone, in December. When he told me, I said some things to him about you that I shouldn't have said. Okay? I want to apologize for them. You don't have to. I do, though. Then okay. Eleanor nodded once, and she looked down at the baby again, and she didn't say anything else. Lena did not say anything else either. There was no need to. The apology was on the couch between them, wrapped in a blue blanket, snoring slightly, and that was enough. Margaret came around slower. Margaret took 2.5 years. Margaret sent, eventually, for Isaiah's 3rd birthday, a small wooden rocking horse from a shop in Cape Cod, and a card that said, in Margaret's handwriting, I'm sorry I was a jerk, kid. Love, Aunt Margaret, and Lena read the card twice and put it in the box under the bed, where she kept the things she was not ready to throw away, including, still, the handkerchief with the embroidered AW in the corner, which had, over the years, become the kind of object a woman keeps, not because she looks at it, but because she knows it is there. Lena finished her MFA in May of the year Isaiah turned 2. She walked in a robe and a hood across a stage in a gym in Boston, and Adrian and Ruth and Isaiah were in the 3rd row, and Isaiah said loudly, during a speech that was not the speech she walked for, Mama! And the woman sitting in front of him turned around and laughed, and Lena, on the stage, heard him and did not cry, only because she had promised herself she would not, and because she had gotten better in 2 years at keeping promises she had made to herself. Her thesis was a collection of short stories. One of them, the one about the bookstore clerk who meets the rich man in a rainstorm, she never sent out, and never published, and never, for the rest of her life, let anyone read. Not because it was bad, because it was hers. They moved back to New York 3 weeks after graduation. They took the apartment on the Upper West Side that Adrian had kept but not lived in for 2 years, because it was bigger. And because Lena said she did not want Isaiah to grow up thinking that where his family lived had anything to do with what his family could afford, she wanted him to grow up in a place that fit them. And Brookline had fit them, but Brookline had been borrowed, and they were going home. And then they did the thing. The bookstore. Mrs. Hawthorne had retired in September of the year Lena moved to Boston. Quietly, with a pension Adrian had arranged that she had agreed to only after 6 months of resistance. The store had stayed open the whole time, run by a manager Adrian had hired on Lena's recommendation, and it had broken even for 2 years, which was the best it had done in a decade. When Lena came back to New York, she walked in on a Tuesday afternoon, without telling the manager she was coming, and she stood in the doorway of Hawthorne and Sons, and she looked at the place where her life had cracked open, and she thought, I want to do something with this. She told Adrian that night, she said, I want to do something with the store. Do what with it? I want to I want to make it something, not just a bookstore. I want to do events, readings, a writing workshop on Saturdays for the kids in the neighborhood for free. I want to I want to put a coffee counter in and chairs, real chairs, not the plastic thing Mrs. Hawthorne had. Okay? And I want to pay for all of it. He set down his fork. Lena, I mean it. I want to pay for the renovation, out of my own money, out of what I'm going to make. I'll get a loan. I'll figure it out. Lena, I know you have, Adrian. I know. I'm not being prideful for no reason. She took a breath. I want this to be the thing I built, not the thing you bought me. I want to walk into this place in 10 years and know that the couch in the corner is there because I picked it out with money I earned. I want Isaiah to walk in and know that about his mother. Can you understand that? He looked at her for a long time. Yes, he said, finally. I can understand that. I don't love it. I know. I won't love it for about 6 months, but I'll sit with it. Okay. Can I help you with the renovation? You can swing a hammer on weekends. Is that a real offer? If you bring your own hammer. I don't own a hammer. Then buy one. He laughed. She laughed. They were both aware, without saying so, that he was worth still, after everything, somewhere north of $300 million, and that his wife was about to take out a small business loan from a community bank in Queens to renovate his building, and that this, somehow, was what a successful marriage looked like in their specific case. Love, in their house, had turned out to be a long, ongoing negotiation about who got to do what, and they were getting, with practice, better at the negotiation. The store reopened in October. They called it Carter & Sons, which was Lena's joke at her grandfather's expense. He had had 3 daughters and no sons, and she had wanted the name to carry him somewhere. And they kept Hawthorne's old pressed tin ceiling, and they sanded the floors, and they put in a coffee counter run by a woman Ruth had known for 40 years who made, by common agreement in that part of Brooklyn, the best coffee on that block. Mrs. Hawthorne came to the opening. She was 72 by then, smaller than she had been, and she brought her niece from White Plains, and she stood in the middle of the shop with her hand on the counter Lena had chosen herself, and she looked around, and she cried, not quietly, and Lena held her, and neither of them said anything, and Adrian stood near the window and watched them and did not come over, because he understood that this was a conversation the two of them needed to have without words and without him. The Saturday workshop started in November. It was free. 6 kids signed up the first week, 11 the second, 20 by February. Lena taught it herself on Saturday mornings from 10 to noon, and Adrian took Isaiah to the playground 2 blocks over for those 2 hours, every single Saturday, without fail, for the next 7 years. They had a daughter eventually. Her name was June. She was born on a Sunday in the spring of Isaiah's 6th year, and she was, unlike her brother, born fast. 3 hours of labor, almost scandalously quick, which Ruth said was because June had good manners. June looked like Ruth. She had the same small face and the same directness, and by the time she was 4, she had memorized the names of every book in the children's section of Carter & Sons, which Adrian, who did not understand how this was possible, would sometimes quiz her on over dinner and lose. Ruth died in the autumn of Isaiah's 10th year. It was not sudden. It was not cruel. She had been tired for about a year and then very tired for about 2 months, and then she had gone into the hospital on a Thursday for what she was told was fluid in her lungs, and she had not come home. She was 87. She died on a Sunday morning in a room on the 7th floor of the hospital on Kings Highway, with Lena on one side of the bed and Adrian on the other side of the bed, and Isaiah in the chair by the window holding June on his lap. The last thing Ruth said that was a full sentence was, "Lena, honey, you tell the boy to stop growing. He's going to be taller than his father." The last thing she said at all was Lena's name. Lena had thought for years that she had already done her hardest grieving, that her mother had taken the worst of it at 14 and that anything else would be a smaller weight. She was wrong. Grief did not get smaller. Grief got more specific. Losing her mother had taken a shape out of the world and left it empty. Losing Ruth took a shape out of her chest. She did not go into the store for 2 weeks. Adrian ran it badly, and did not tell her he was running it badly. He sat in the back office and answered emails he did not know how to answer, and he let the staff run the floor, and he let Isaiah, who was 10 and who had, by then, a better head for retail than some of the adults, pick out the window display, which that month was all Ruth's favorite books, with a small handwritten card in the corner that said, "In memory of Ruth Carter, who taught us to read." Lena came in on the third Monday. She stood in the middle of the store and she looked at the window display, and she looked at her son, who was at the coffee counter pretending not to watch her, and she looked at her husband, who was pretending to organize a shelf he had already organized. She walked over to Isaiah. She put her arms around him. He was almost as tall as she was. She put her face in the top of his hair, which smelled like Ruth's shampoo, because Ruth had always bought him the same drugstore brand she bought for herself. A running argument in their household that Ruth had always won by the simple tactic of buying the shampoo anyway. "She'd like the window," Lena said quietly. "Yeah? Yeah, baby. I didn't know which one she liked best. You picked right. I picked 3. That's why you picked right." Years pass in a story faster than they pass in a life. That is the dishonesty of stories. In a life, the years of small work, the Saturday workshops, the coffee refills, the dinners at the kitchen table, the homework, the bad colds, the school plays, the arguments about screen time, the arguments about money that they had anyway, despite having enough money, because every married couple argues about money. The years of small work are the life. They are not the parts you cut, they are the parts. Lena wrote 2 more books over the next 12 years. The first one did not sell very well. The second one sold better. Neither of them made her famous, which she understood, eventually, was a gift. She kept the bookstore. She hired a second manager and then a third. She opened a smaller store in Harlem in the year Isaiah turned 16, and a third in Jersey City 3 years after that. She never called them a chain. She called them, in interviews, 3 bookstores with the same name, and she meant it. She knew, by name, every employee in all 3. Adrian did not go back to running companies. He sat on a few boards. He taught, for 1 semester, a class at Columbia Business School about failure, which had been, he told Lena, the most honest work he had ever done in his life. He wrote, eventually, a book of his own, a short, plain book about the ways money lies to the men who have it, which was reviewed politely and bought widely by people who underlined the sentences they wanted to read aloud to their wives. The dedication on the first page said, "For Lena, who told me to stop." They were not, in any of those years, the kind of couple who did not fight. They fought. They fought about the store, about the apartment, about Isaiah's college applications, about June's habit of running off to the bodega without telling anyone where she was going, about the right way to load a dishwasher, about the right way to load a dishwasher again, about Adrian's tendency, under stress, to revert to a man who tried to solve things by writing checks, and Lena's tendency, under stress, to revert to a woman who went quiet for 2 days and then came out of the bedroom like nothing had happened. They fought, and they made up, and they fought again, and over time they got better at the fighting, not at avoiding it, but at getting through it, at finding the end of an argument without either of them losing anything important on the way. On the 20th anniversary of the night Adrian Wolfe walked into Hawthorne and Sons out of the rain, Lena closed the store early. She told the staff she was going to take inventory. She was lying. She did not take inventory. She sat at the counter, the old counter, the one she had kept from Mrs. Hawthorne's shop, the glass cloudy now in places where 20 years of elbows had worn it, and she waited. At 7 o'clock, the bell over the door rang. Adrian came in. He was 65. His hair had gone mostly gray, except for a streak above his right ear that had stayed dark out of pure stubbornness. He was wearing a coat she had bought him 6 years ago. He had an umbrella he had not opened because he never opened umbrellas, and he was, as predicted, wet. "We're closed," she said. "The sign says 8. "Sign's wrong." He smiled. He walked the length of the shop, past the new coffee counter, past the children's section with its 2 good soft chairs, past the poetry shelves Lena had rearranged 6 times over the years, and was still, in her opinion, not done with, and he stopped at the counter. "Do you have a first edition of The Master and Margarita?" he said. "Bulgakov. Ginsberg translation. Hardcover." "I do. It's not for sale." "How much would it not be for sale for?" $240. That's underpriced by about $200. Is it? Yes. He leaned on the counter. She looked at his hands. They were still the hands she remembered. A little older, the knuckles more defined. A thin white scar across the back of the left one from an accident with a kitchen knife in the second year of Isaiah's life. She put her hand over his on the counter. Their fingers did the old soft thing they had done the first time their hands touched, which was nothing at all, because nothing was ever necessary. I have to tell you something, he said. Okay? I wouldn't change any of it. What? Any of it. The company, the mess, all of it. The way I screwed it up, the way I almost lost you, the way... I wouldn't change any of it, because I'd be afraid that if I changed any of it, I'd end up somewhere else. And I like where I ended up. Adrian? I know. I sound like a man on a porch. You sound like a man on a porch. I'm allowed. I'm 65. You're 65. And I love you, Lena. I know. They stood there for a while, not saying anything, and through the window of Carter and Sons, the rain started up again. Not a storm this time, just a steady New York rain, the kind that would be gone by morning and would leave the sidewalks shiny and the gutters running and the whole city smelling, briefly, like something new. And Lena thought, for the first time in a long time, about the 22-year-old girl on the ladder in the poetry section, the girl with the paper cut on her knuckle and the coffee stain on her sweater, the girl who had turned around because a man at the door had said, "The sign says 8." She had been wrong about so many things, that girl. She had been wrong about how hard it was going to be. She had been wrong about how many times she would almost leave. She had been wrong about the kind of life the two of them were going to build, which had turned out to be not at all the life she had imagined on the twin bed in Brooklyn with the laptop on her knees, Googling a name she hadn't had to Google for very long to know it was going to change her. But she had been right about one thing in her own quiet way when she was 22 and full of doubt, and had walked out of that bookstore on 13th Street anyway to follow a man she did not quite trust to a diner she trusted very much. She had been right to go. That was the thing she wanted her children to know, eventually. Not that love fixed anything. Love had not fixed anything. Love had, in fact, caused most of the hardest hours of her adult life. Not that money was not the point, although it wasn't, and she would tell them that too. Not that the rich man in the rainstorm was a story they should want for themselves. She hoped, honestly, that neither of them would ever need such a story, that their own stories would be quieter and kinder and come to them earlier. What she wanted them to know was smaller than that. It was this, that a life was built mostly out of the small moments when you chose not to disappear, when you said the hard sentence at the kitchen table, when you picked up the phone, when you got on the train, when you stayed in the room. That was it. That was the whole thing. You stayed in the room, and you stayed in the room the next day, and you stayed in the room the day after that. And after enough days, you looked up, and you had a life, and it was yours, and it had been yours the whole time, and nobody had given it to you, and nobody could take it away. Adrian squeezed her hand on the counter. Come on, he said, let's go home. Isaiah's bringing that girl tonight, the one he's scared to bring. Ruth would have hated her. Ruth would have loved her. Ruth would have loved her in about 2 years. That's the same thing. Fine. Come on. She locked the register. She turned off the lights, one by one, the way she had turned them off 1,000 times before, the way she had turned them off the night she had met him, the way she would turn them off for as long as Carter and Sons was a place that existed on 11th Street in the city of New York. She came around the counter. She took her coat off the hook by the door. He held it for her. She put her arms in. They went out into the rain. He opened the umbrella. She laughed at him because he did not know how to hold an umbrella for two people and had never learned. He tried. He got it mostly right. They walked up 11th Street together, not particularly fast, and she put her arm through his, and at the corner they turned toward the subway, because they still, after all these years, took the subway when it was raining, because the subway was the fastest way to almost anywhere in the city they had chosen to keep living in, and because some habits were not habits, but the shape of the life you had decided on, and she had decided on it, a long time ago now, on a rainy Tuesday, at 22, with a paper cut on her knuckle, and her whole life waiting on the other side of a door she had not yet opened. She had opened it. She had kept opening it. That was the story.